Joining us now is Representative Thomas Massie, one of the 5 lawmakers who voted against that measure on Thursday. So, Congressman, last time we talked to you, you were voicing your objections to the $2.3 trillion relief bill. And now we see yesterday, once again, you're voicing the similar type of objections to the $500 billion relief package. Can you explain to me and our viewers why you are objecting to that bill?
Well, this stimulus package, it's sort of like a blood transfusion for the economy. The problem is our economy's bleeding, and we haven't stopped the bleeding. We're pressing on the brakes and the gas at the same time. We're trying to help small businesses with this injection of money, but at the same time, we're paying their employees more to stay home than to go to work with the $600. And finally, this bill that passed yesterday, the supplemental to the stimulus, it doesn't do anything about the money that's going to the companies that don't need it, like the 75 publicly traded companies that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They can still get these programs and these loans, which aren't really loans, they're just grants. So what I think we need to do is we need to open the economy back up, let the small businesses go back to work, go back to the economy and get things going again. Otherwise, it's going to get pretty grim.
And we heard a similar type of message made by Senator Rand Paul in the upper chamber, of course, saying that we can't just keep feeding money into this program and this giving it to the small businesses because there's nowhere to spend that money for the time being. Consumers aren't going out. They're not putting it back into the economy. So what do you think the desired path is when it comes to this? Do you think that we need to open the economy first and then worry about the small businesses?
We need to absolutely open the economy. And the talk about bailing out the states is really bad because it's the states, a lot of these governors are killing their own economies. Now, I understand the need for social distancing, but I think they've gone too far in a lot of the states, like in the state of Kentucky. You know, Senator Ron Johnson had a good idea. He said, if you made more money in 2020 than you did 2019, maybe you shouldn't qualify for loan forgiveness under the Small Business Paycheck Protection Plan. And I think that's probably a good idea. You know, make sure it goes to the people who need it. But here's the problem. We're pumping this money out. In fact, some of those $1,200 checks went to dead people in my congressional district. I had constituents telling me that. And ultimately, it's the taxpayer who's going to pay for this. If it were up to me, Alex, I would fund a Manhattan Project against this virus. I mean, every scientist and every engineer and every doctor should be working on this problem, and let's pay them to do it instead of paying everybody to stay home.
And you talked earlier about the idea that a lot of this money is going to big businesses who may not necessarily need these funds at a time where a lot of small businesses do. And you were joined by 4 of your colleagues as well who voiced that same message. But we also hear it from leftist lawmakers such as Representative Alexandria OcasioCortez, who also didn't like the idea that this was essentially a big check for a lot of big corporations. So if you were in charge of crafting a bill that would prevent that from happening, what would that look like?
Well, you know, each family might expect to receive $3,000 per family, but when I calculate it, there's about $60,000 of deficit spending and loaning of money to the big corporations. So only 5% of it's going to individuals. So, you know, I have some colleagues on the left side of the aisle who are correct when they say this is a transfer of money from the middle class and the working class to the rich. What would I do? I would stop the bleeding. If there's any money that's going to go to the states, condition it upon the states opening their economies back up. Don't pay them to keep their economies shut down. Alex, we're going to be here in another 4 weeks with another $500 billion, or $500 billion, that'd be $500 billion, if we don't do some common sense changes right now to the policies at the state level.
And your decision on the $2.3 trillion stimulus package ruffled some feathers among the president as well as some of your other colleagues. And this most recent decision comes at a time where we saw Liz Cheney, the head of the GOP, kind of walk back funding for your primary opponent. But the idea that they were funding your primary opponent to begin with is a little bit interesting and telling to me to begin with. What is your response to that?
Yeah, you know, back 3 weeks ago when I said if truckers and nurses and grocery store workers are going to work and deemed essential employees, then Congress should go to work. And they got so mad at me here in Washington, D.C. when I insisted that they come to work and vote that I had, like the #3 Republican, Liz Cheney, donate to my primary opponent. Now, there's two interesting things about that. Number one, yesterday they all came to work. We had nearly 400 members of Congress come to work. They admitted that at home they're buying ice cream, right? If they can buy ice cream at the grocery store at home, they can come to work here and vote. And the other interesting thing is, in her rush to finance my opponent, my primary opponent, Liz Cheney, donated to a guy who's made tweets, social media tweets, that a lot of people consider to be racist. And so she had to ask for her money back from my opponent because of these tweets, of his views on race and ethnicity and culture, which I don't think line up with the GOP. It's certainly not somebody we want to invite into the GOP, but she was so mad at me, but I didn't hear an apology yesterday when everybody came to work and voted and used my talking points in their speeches, that if nurses and truckers and grocers can come to work, then by golly, Congress can come to work.
And to your credit, that's the objection that you were voicing last time you were on this show, the fact that there wasn't a consensus of people on Capitol Hill to make this vote. They weren't even enough to have quorum. And that's something that you were saying goes against the Constitution. And it also came at a time where we were talking about remote voting. And now we see the party kind of uniting against that message as well, something that you were speaking about a couple weeks ago, to your credit once again. But Representative Massie, it's always a pleasure having you on, breaking down the philosophical idea behind your objections. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex.